Thanks to all of you. Look, there are just so many faces that make this school what it is. You were already welcomed home. Let me also welcome you home. These are your family members next to you here. Let me start with a phrase that I just can't get out of my head. The phrase is this: it is our alumni that make this place great. It is our alumni that make this place great. We haven't always thought about it that way. In the pre-modern era, I'll define that as pre-1980, I think we would have said it is the faculty and the state that make this place great. It is the state that makes this place great. And the state still plays an important role. The state, as you know, the state of California, well, many of you know, funds 12% of UC Berkeley now. It was different than when we were here. I was actually here in 1980 as an undergrad. The Haas School gets no net funding from the state. We still have a line item in our budget, but no net funding. Now that is actually not a surprise relative to other public business schools, Michigan, or even private business schools. Stanford GSB is a net funder of Stanford. But it's different than our history. Now the faculty are important, and so are the staff. But we wouldn't have the wonderful staff and faculty that we have if not for our alumni. So let me strip out what you, as our alumni, have done for us and try to imagine what this place would look like without it. The space wouldn't be here. These three buildings wouldn't be here. The Haas campus was the first set of buildings built on this campus with private funding. The first privately funded capital project. We wouldn't have a lot of the faculty that we have. Toby Stewart, just one name, resigned tenure from HBS, Harvard Business School, to come to Berkeley. And he's now on our faculty. He could literally be anywhere. And the endowed chairs, for example, that are part of the bargain with faculty were all, obviously, alumni contributions. How about admissions? Let's just go kind of right into the operations of the place. It isn't just about finances. You know, alums conduct over 1,000 interviews of students a year for us. You know what one of the most valuable things you can do for us is, for me? Send us a student. Send us a great student who wouldn't have otherwise thought to apply to Berkeley. That's really valuable. So alumni make admissions go. Alumni drive career services at the undergraduate and the graduate level. Just think how many leads you and others you know have sent to Berkeley that make these professional, these life opportunities possible for our students. Imagine stripping that out. What would it look like? The classroom. Many of you have been in the classroom. You've delivered to our students. Strip all of that out. It is really extraordinary. Well, now let me just talk about the budget. So our endowment crossed on June 30th, the end of our academic year, our endowment for the first time crossed the $300 million mark. That's just the business school. That's a great thing. That was alumni. I look back in the data and I tried, when did we cross 100 million? Crossed 100 million in 1999, 15 years prior. If we can move that 3x in the next 15 years, we're scratching at $1 billion. Now, that is a great number. We are also now competing against 3 or 4 or 5 business schools that obviously have been in the endowment game much longer than we have. But if you ask, let me ask you this question. Of our operating budget every year, so we raised about $40 million, as a school, we raised together about $40 million last year. Some of that went into building the new building, which I will talk about very briefly. Some of that went into endowments. Some of it is current use gifts. It goes right into our operating budget. Let's do this or that, okay? But if you just look at the operating budget, payout on the endowment goes into the operating budget. Current use gifts go into the operating budget. The annual fund that you make possible for me is $4 million a year, roughly, of discretionary funds. It's like high-powered money. I can aim it at just the most valuable stuff that I'm seeing out there. And so just those three sources, payout on the endowment, current use gifts, annual fund, those things add up to about 17% of our operating budget. Strip that out, totally different program. Okay, I just wanted to start here. This is the modern era. And our star continues to rise because you and people just like you are saying, this institution matters to me. This institution, what it stands for, what it does, matters to me. And for me and my wife, I know, we're both alums of Haas. This is the institution that has had the most impact on our lives by far. Okay, so let me just start there, right? The alumni are fundamental to who we are and who we will be in the future. So thank you. Thank you. Let me say a few things about what's up these days, real quickly. I could talk about that giant hole in the ground out there. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there's a hole in the ground. There's also a real-time construction camera, if you like that sort of thing. I spend about 5 hours a day just watching on the web, but I have to be honest, okay? So very quickly, this is, we have to renew our physical capital all the time, right? We're the second oldest business school in the country. You know that. I hope you know that. The University of Pennsylvania has the oldest. The University of Chicago's launched the same year we did, 1898. And if you take 1898, our launch year, to today, 117 years rather, you get an inflection point in 1995, and that's when these buildings came online, right? That's when people really started feeling a sense of affinity. I belong to this place. This institution is me. I am this institution. And you see it in our data, our levels of engagement, all of that stuff. This new building won't be quite as large an inflection point, but it's going to be an enormous refresh because it's adding about 80,000 gross square feet to the existing 240,000 gross square feet, so it's adding about a third. But it's not just adding a third, it's adding a totally different mix. That building is all about the students. There's not a faculty or staff office in that building. And it's all the stuff that you would want your classroom and study spaces to look like today that you couldn't have possibly forecast 20 years ago when we built these buildings. So it's sort of like remix the place to serve the students the way we need to serve them for the next 20 years based on what's happened to management education since we built these wonderful buildings. And these are still obviously wonderful buildings serving us well. So that, in a nutshell, is what that building is about. It is also completely privately financed, and people have been super generous in helping us get there. So that's going to be a turning point. It'll be, the due date on the construction critical path is July 22nd, 2016. I don't know the hour of the completion date, but that's, anyways, the construction projects are complicated. We're now out of the ground, though, in the sense that all the excavation is done. Excavation, when Native American remains might show up, and there are a lot of things that can change a construction project. We are now out of the ground, and the tower crane will be out there in about 2 weeks, and then it's steel, and it's going to happen fast. So that's a very exciting thing for us. So that's sort of the physical capital. I talked a little bit about the financial capital. If you've seen the most recent issue with energy on the cover of our Berkeley-Haas magazine, my dean's letter is actually about sort of the balance sheet, and I talk a little bit more about physical capital and financial capital, and also human capital, our faculty. We've never been as successful as we have been in the faculty markets. We literally are winning faculty against the best schools pretty regularly now. People want to be here. This place stands for something different. You might say, well, where do we rank? And we've got our undergraduate program ranks number 2 in its most important ranking. Our evening weekend program, which is the biggest of our programs in terms of people, ranks number 1, and actually by a margin. It's pulling away from Chicago, which is number 2, and Kellogg, which is number 3. So anyways, we have great programs across the board. And you might think, yeah, so we're sort of in that top N's getting to be a smaller number. We are the only public school in that top N. I mean, for a lot of our faculty and staff, what this place represents is part of why they're here. Because we are our own category in some really important ways relative to those 5, 6, or 7 enormously important business schools that we compete with. That's actually important for why some of the people are here. And that means something to us, and I think it means something to most of you as well. So that's part of why we're doing so well in the faculty markets. Let me talk a little bit about, so this weekend, yesterday, in fact, I'll just use this as a sort of storyline. Yesterday was an important day, in part because many of you arrived here yesterday, but it was an important day for another reason as well. It was our cell event for our full-time MBA program. By cell event, I mean these are people who've been admitted to round 2 of admissions in the full-time MBA. And we have cell events for all of our programs. It's just yesterday happened to be the full-time MBA cell event. So these are people that are coming from, I was talking to a fellow who'd come from Spain, and there were people, these are international admits, obviously. And many of them are here. The thing is, when your star rises, as far as our school's star has risen, I mean, most of the people you are admitting are going to have got into 1, 2, or 3 of a set of schools that includes Harvard and Stanford and Wharton and Chicago and Kellogg and MIT, okay? So that's just the reality of it. So they are here deciding this weekend, they have to put a deposit in on Tuesday. It's just sort of what the world looks like. Our world is competitive, okay? You think it's easy here? It's not easy here. All right. So then the question is, they have to make a decision. Are they going to come? What differentiates us? Why is this place so distinctive? Why should they make the call when they have all these other options, right? So that's what's going on this weekend. And so when we talk about that with them, we usually talk about these big separators, these competitive separators. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. But the fundamental 3 categories for us are place, people, and culture. Place, people, and culture. So place, part of place is that we're part of, I hope you don't mind this phrase, but we're part of a master brand called UC Berkeley that is an enormous asset. It is an enormous asset. U.S. News just put out a couple of months ago a global university ranking. So Oxford's in there and Cambridge and everybody's in there. And it was quite remarkable. So Harvard was number 1 globally. MIT was number 2. Berkeley was just slightly below MIT at number 3. A distance to 4, which was Stanford. Hey, Stanford's a good place, okay? Anyways, look, the rankings are rankings, but what we are blessed with being part of an exquisite university, right? I won't go through the list, but think of some wonderful business schools at some wonderful campuses, and then think of putting Berkeley against that university. We win on that against a lot of great business schools, right? Okay, so then there's also, how are we connecting to Berkeley, right? So take behavioral economics, right? So our very own Janet Yellen, of course, is who taught many of you macro when you took it here. She was teaching macro for some 30 years here. Her husband is George Akerlof, an economics professor here, and George Akerlof, among other fields, broke new ground in the field of behavioral economics and behavioral finance. So the area of behavioral finance and economic research, George Akerlof, Nobel Prize winner. Danny Kahneman did most of his work here. He's now at Princeton, but his work that he's another behavioral economics person. We've got Ulrika Malmendier is one of our faculty members who just won the award for the top finance faculty member, full stop. But one condition, you have to be under 40. So it's sort of, this award's given every 2 years. It's not even given every year. It's actually a quite good forecaster of future Nobel Prizes. So she's the top of the top of the top of the top. 6 months after she won her award, Harvard Business School came after her, guns blazing. Again, if I didn't have that 17% of my operating budget that I mentioned before, the outcome of that retention, I guarantee you, would have been different, right? She stayed. She stayed. And so she, Terry O'Dean, anyways, there's an area of behavioral economics and finance where it's just like Berkeley and Berkeley-Haas are just known everywhere. We have this new program that's being launched by one of our faculty members that we recently recruited from Chicago. in finance, University Chicago Booth. Adair Morse and others have launched a program called Crowd Berkeley. And it's all this sort of crowdfunding, these new ways of funding for-profit and non-for-profit ventures. She's one of the best scholars here, anywhere, and this is what she's spending her time working on, and this is connecting to our Institute for Business and Social Impact and the stuff that Laura Tyson is leading. Anyway, it's like, okay, so that's part of Berkeley, too, right? And then part of place, I'm still on place, there's Berkeley part of place, there is this Bay Area. It is just such an engine for not just wealth creation, but future creation, right? I mean, a month ago, I got to have lunch, one of the fun things about my job, with the CFO at Ford. I think, you know, I'm obviously being silly in this comment, but it would be easy to think, oh, automobiles, old economy. Bay Area, new economy. It's like, automobiles ain't no old economy. And it's not just Tesla, and it's not just Google autonomous cars. And why is he here? Because he knows Ford needs to be closer to this. The automobile industry needs to be closer to what's happening here. I heard the CEO of an airline say recently, we are a technology company with wings. So this is not just about, oh, well, we own tech and startups, but then there's all this other stuff going on around the world. The whole world, industry after industry, is looking at what's going on here and saying, we need some of that secret sauce. We need a piece of that. We happen to be a business school that has benefited from and contributed to that ecosystem since anybody was using the term Silicon Valley, right? 50, 60 years ago is when people started even referring to it that way. Okay, so place is an enormous asset. People, always an enormous asset, right? I mean, I could go through an awful lot of our alums, and there just isn't any selecting individuals out, right? One of the things that I went back just yet, this is just something that popped into my head yesterday. There was a Forbes cover story about a year ago with our alum Joe Jimenez on it. He's the CEO of Novartis. He's one of our alums. And the cover story was, will this man cure cancer? And it was talking about some of the bets that Novartis is placing. Many of you probably don't know Joe as one of our alums, but he's just a remarkably, well, but it's not just about CEOs, right? I don't want to just stand up here and talk about CEOs, but I mean, the people that have come from this place that have transformed what's going on out there, I mean, the list is very, very long. Another quick one, just because it's recent, I was in New York not long ago. So Barbara DeSore, our alum Barbara, is now the CEO of Citibank. So there's Citigroup, the conglomerate. She is CEO of Citibank NA, the whole bank. She's been CEO for about a year. I'll tell you a quick story. This links to one of our defining principles, confidence without attitude. I'm in New York with Kathy Andrews. We were visiting Barbara. She'd been in the seat as CEO for, 3 months. So it was probably, 8 months ago or something. And so you go into the, I can't remember which address it was, but Park Avenue and one of the big buildings. And so we're down there in security. Can I see your ID? Yeah, here's my ID. Who you coming to see? Barbara DeSore. And the woman, she's been there for 3 months. The woman says, oh, Barbara, we love Barbara. She said, she comes in and says hello to us by name. This idea that you're here and I'm here, not Barbara. This idea that you're here and I'm here, not Janet Yellen, I guarantee it, right? So this stuff matters. All right, so that transitions me to culture. At the end of the day, we have to have a sharp narrative. What sets you apart as a school? So part of what I said yesterday is there's this cluster of stuff that we've always been great at, and the data show it. Here's a cluster called technology, innovation, entrepreneurship. We're great at it. There's a big cluster called social impact. We're great at it and have been a long time, and the whole world knows we're really good at it, whether that's corporate social responsibility or nonprofit and public leadership and so forth, right? There are pockets of worldwide strength, clean tech, Lawrence Berkeley Lab, our clean tech to market program, or real estate, okay? One of the things that has become a real definite separator is this culture. Every business school has a culture, of course. If you go on those websites and you look at sort of what their stated cultures are, I mean, they're good words. Part of what we wanted to do was write down some stuff that is us that our competitors can't say, or it's hard for them to say, and that the market wants, those three things. So how do we do that, right? So I'm not going to walk you through all the schools, but think about questioning the status quo, just as an example. The first question, by the way, when you say, how do you operationalize that with the students? First thing I say is, first question, isn't there a better way to do this? Isn't there a better way to do this? If we all think of that question a little bit more often, we're going to be better for it. Okay, so how do you operationalize it? Bang, there's a question. And so, well, let me use Harvard as an example. Harvard is a great business school. There's no question about it. In many people's minds, it's still the best business school in the world. It's also a really innovative business school. I've visited Harvard. It's amazing. They're really good. And I know the dean there, Dean Noria. If Dean Noria came out and said, Harvard Business School is about question the status quo, sort of like, Harvard's the oldest university in the country. Its tradition is what their product is. It just, he can't do that, right? And that's just because of who they are. Okay. Question the status quo, confidence without attitude. Beyond yourself, so we are a public university. I just mentioned something, we are a different category. Why? We're the only public business school in the top 10. The idea that service to the public, to something larger, is in our DNA, it's not something people question. That is a very natural thing for us to write down. Okay, so culture is really important, and we aim to take it seriously. When we interview somebody for any of our programs, and they have, for example, a GMAT score of 800, and there is a clear violation of confidence without attitude, they're not getting in. We will not trade this off to chase numbers. And if we're not willing to do that, then we are talking out of both sides of our mouths, right? And part of what that does is it allows you to know when you recommend somebody for one of those jobs, which we need you to do, that you're going to feel comfortable having that person represent you. Because when you recommend an alum, they are representing you. And if you share values, that's a lot easier a recommendation to give. Place, people, and culture. Now I get to introduce our speaker, because we have to get him up here. But let me close my comments with, I am really happy you're here, and I hope you get just as much out of this weekend as you can. Okay? Thanks very much. Thank you.